A few months ago, a human resident of a city far away became sick from a disease originating in bats. Since then, 1 million people all over the world have died, 1 out of 5 of them in the US. The coronavirus is on track to kill as many Americans in a year as the Second World War did over 4 years. As in most wars, the dead are concentrated among workers, especially people of color. Among those who've died from COVID in the US between 18 to 39 years of age, 80% are non white. Let me say that again. Among people of prime working age, 18 to 39, which I'm also guessing is a big chunk of our DSA membership is in that age group, 80%, 80, in that age group who've died so far in the US from COVID are non white. The pandemic has become a leading political force. Large sections of not just the population, but also of the ruling class are deserting the Trump administration. In growing desperation, the administration and Republican Party are resorting to wholesale voter suppression and barely disguised appeals to white supremacy. This election is shaping up to be the most bitter, consequential struggle for state power in the US that we've seen in quite a while. Now, we in DSA, the largest socialist organization in the US, have chosen not to take sides in this presidential election. We explicitly do not support the Democratic candidate. And we obviously hate the Republican candidate who even refuses to wear a mask. In effect, we are saying this presidential election is not our fight. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we think the election itself is not important. And that's what we are here to talk about this evening. My name is Sanjeev Gupta. On behalf of DSA's National Political Education, as well as Growth and Development Committees, I'm so happy to have your company tonight for a conversation about this struggle for state power. Does it matter to us? How? Why? And what do we do over the next few weeks and months? I'm talking tonight with two wonderful comrades, Kion Liberato, who's a member of DSA's National Political Committee, and with Bianca Cunningham, who has just been elected to the first executive committee of the Afro-Socialist and Socialists of Color Caucus. Congratulations, Bianca. Congratulations to the caucus. Now, we are calling this a debate, but it's not like those other debates that you haven't been watching. We are not trying to score points off each other. We are not aiming for sound bites and so on. Instead, we are working together to clarify what is at stake for us as socialists, as DSA, as advocates for the multiracial working class. What is at stake for us in this election, and also what is not? The event is divided roughly into two parts. First, we'll address the broad questions. Does it matter to the multiracial working class who wins? Why? Why not? How does it matter? Second, does it matter to us socialists who wins? Again, why not, or how? So those two broad questions will frame kind of the conversation generally, and then we'll sort of ask kind of specific questions arising from that. Kion and Bianca will start with short introductory statements, and then we'll have a moderated back and forth. I'll step in, to maybe change direction once in a while and so on. The Q&A box in the webinar is going to be open throughout. Please use it. Periodically, we'll take questions from there to pose to Kion and Bianca. That should keep us going for about an hour, maybe an hour and a quarter. And then we'll move to the question of, well, what do we do next? And I'll turn it over to Megan Svoboda from the Growth and Development Committee to discuss the November strategy. So Kion, floor is yours.
First, thank you, Sandy, for getting us started. And thank you for everybody for putting this together. It is important a very important discussion to have. I would say, just to start with the question, does this election matter, and really do elections in general, do they matter to the multiracial working class? And I think the answer is has got to be yes, they do matter. Um, I think the longer question we'll probably get into this as we go along, but is the question is how. But they absolutely matter, and I think in particular you've already started off by talking about just how many folks have been impacted by this administration's handling of the coronavirus, of the pandemic. And I mean, with 200 plus thousand people already gone as a result of this virus, so many more will unfortunately lose their lives as a result of poor handling of the virus, um, of the pandemic. And then there's all those people who we haven't even counted that have not been able to get appropriate medical care as a result of overflow in the hospitals and lack of people and equipment to deal with them as a result of the pandemic. By the way, all of which stems from the deeper problem, which is that we don't have a universal national healthcare system that actually is designed for people to use it in order to stay well, right? So that's also another factor that we can't ignore. I mean, I think there's millions of folks that have lost their jobs, so that matters to the working class. We still have people in Flint, Michigan, and all over various parts of the country whose water supply and air supply are being contaminated. So that matters to the working class. Um, and I mean, we're going to be seeing state and municipal budgets that are under severe austerity campaigns going forward. So that's going to hurt working class people. Um, and of course, I mean, it's just so many different things, but I'll just say, it hasn't really been in the news much, but there's still the folks that are at the border, um, who have been in these detention centers or concentration camps, whatever you want to call them, that are in, I mean, they were already in inhumane conditions, and now the conditions are worse. So we can't forget those folks. That's going to hurt the working class. And of course, that means working class people of color are going to get it even worse. That's just the pattern, the organizational pattern of our society. So I think it matters absolutely, and I think it matters to socialists, who wins elections for a few different reasons. But for sure, many of us are working class. I know I count myself in the ranks of the multiracial working class, and so I think about my family, and think about my community as well as myself, my coworkers. So it will matter to them quite a bit who is the next president and how they handle things. And but I think strategically it will also matter to the working class, because it matters in the sense that who your opponent is, right? Who the enemy that you are up against most immediately will often have significant influence over what the political terrain is that you are engaging in your struggle. So it will raise questions about what our strategies will be. I think it's important to say that it doesn't matter who it is in this, who is president, in the sense that we still will have to struggle and we will still have to organize. I think that, in short, I'll say I think there is there's a misconception of what it means to try to push a candidate to the left. Uh, and so there's an assumption that if we can just get a candidate that's not as bad as the other one, then we'll have an easier shot at least of advancing the socialist movement. And I would argue that that's just not really the case, right? I think the struggle is going to look different. I think it's going to be harder in certain ways, but in terms of actually achieving the ultimate goal of building a comprehensive socialist movement, I think that there's a whole other set of questions that we need to talk about. So I will yield my time there, I guess. Thank you.
I also just want to say what's up to everyone. Thank you to Sanjeev and everyone who put this call together. I think it's an incredibly important conversation to have. And I just want to say tonight, I have no idea like where exactly I'm going to land or what I feel about this. It's really been a swirl of emotions and kind of just like wanting to deal with the thing in front of us, which is COVID, and trying to be in the streets to support the uprising against state violence. And I've really been pushing this kind of like to the back of my mind. But this is, I guess, now that we're so close, as good a time ever to have this conversation. And I remember in 2016 when Trump was elected, the day of, and I remember, watching CNN the night before, and I would just like fall asleep and wake up at 2:00 in the morning and be like, he's still winning. And then I remember like going to work and the train, and just the mood in New York City was just so, down, and people were just really somber and I think like reflective and dispirited. But I also remember thinking to myself, like, yes, this is kind of like a weird alternate universe that Trump won when they all said that he wouldn't. Understanding the reasons why he did. I have many family members that support Trump. But also I remember having the thought in the first DSA meeting after the Trump, which was our biggest, we had a Trump bump, right? We went from having like 100 people or less at a meeting to the day or the week after Trump was elected, having 500 people in the meeting in Brooklyn. And so that was where our organization really saw a huge boom, our first very huge boom. But I remember thinking as a Black woman sitting in this auditorium of all these like, downwardly mobile millennials, white folks mostly, right? That like, this doesn't feel very much different to me than what it feels like every single time that a president is elected. Like, I don't actually feel any less safe, any less supported, I had something on the line that is now taken away from me because Hillary Clinton didn't win, right? I will say that I feel very different about it this time. And it's obviously because of the attacks on everyone, right? The attacks on reproductive rights, the attacks on education, the attacks on, just science. I mean, you just name it, everything that we care about and that we're fighting for is being like degraded. And so I do feel like we have a stake in this election. However, I'll just go ahead and say the one thing I am certain about is that I don't think that we need to endorse Joe Biden. I don't think that we need to say Joe Biden's name in the whatever we're doing. I think it's certainly like acceptable for us as a socialist organization that saw most of our growth out of being an organization that was fighting Trump. That's what people saw us as, an alternative and a way to come mobilize and organize against, that. I don't think that we need to say Biden's name. I think that it's good enough for us to say we need to get Trump out. It's good enough to say the reasons why we support that. And it's good enough to support people in that process of voting, whether it's taking them to the polls or, protecting the polls from right-wingers or people who may try to suppress the vote there, or making sure people are fed in line while they're waiting for hours, or just being like, vocal about why we want to get rid of Trump. I also remind people, and I'm kind of all over the place right now, but also remind people, I think in the very beginning, our organization grew off of like, the anti-Trump stuff, but in reality, we really backed off of just saying Trump all the time because every other lib organization was doing that. And everybody was presenting it as if it was this individual who was to blame and who was the problem. And we were like, wait a minute, we're socialists, we're democratic socialists. We know that both parties are at fault. And so we were like, they're gonna handle the Trump, they're gonna do the Trump stuff, and we're gonna still continue to indict the system, right? Both parties. And so I think that was really important. And I'll just share too, does it make a difference to working class people? I mean, I'll get into this later, but I mean, I used to work for CWA, and they had me ask a question to Kamala Harris at a CWA political conference that we had 2 years ago. It was for all of the people who were thinking about running for president, and she was there. And one of the question I asked her was basically, how are the Democrats going to change their course to start to support union members, organized labor, working people in this country? Because when you have the majority, you failed us. I mean, I think Obama gave us some things at the labor board, the speedy elections, et cetera, but and more progressive, board agents, that is important. I obviously have used the board and it really was really helpful. But I do also think that like her answer was like, we're gonna, that's why nominees to the Supreme Court are so important. Her mind is not anywhere near like where we're at about building like worker power and, trying to take back from like the 1% and trying to like instill like safety measures for essential workers during COVID. She's not talking about any of that, right? And so we don't need to be like under those illusions that she's going to, or they're going to in any way do anything much different. But I do think it will be different. And the last thing I'll say is that I feel like it is important for us I got a call to do like this very liberal project with the WNBA that was like woke vote. And I was like, why would I do that? They want me to get on and talk about Biden. I'm not going to say vote for Biden. But then I was like, yo, this is something that reaches a demographic that I don't normally talk to, right? I'm usually in DSA spaces. This is a space for 18, to 25-year-olds who are mostly Black and brown. This is a really good opportunity. And I got on the interview and they asked me all about democratic socialism. And like, when I said I'm not voting for Biden, but I'm voting against Trump, like they were like, yes, we're with you. And I want to be really careful about us getting too far, like too close to Biden, because I feel like people can see that. I don't think there's a lot of excitement around him. And I think we have a lot to lose actually by like saying his name or, doing GOTV or like associating the Democratic Socialists of America with anything Biden, because people don't trust him. Yeah, so that's all I'll say for right now. And I know that I probably took the time that Keegan yielded.
Yeah, I don't think we are doing the whole time yielding thing. I guess if, I'll interrupt if I need to. But no, that was great. I think it really both between the two of you, you've laid out probably the conflicting emotions and analyses that a lot of us are having about this moment. So starting with Keon, you started by saying, well, of course it matters because the terrain will be different. And at the same time, yes, the terrain will be different, but neither candidate is actually, or whoever wins, um, we still have to struggle to get to the ultimate objective. So I'm wondering if you can take both of those two things apart for us. So first, how will the terrain be different? So that's another way of asking, does it matter? So how is the terrain different if Trump wins again versus, Biden? And then maybe we'll pause and turn it over to Bianca, but the follow-up question would be, well, okay, so let's just start with that. How will the terrain be different?
Right. Well, first, I'm glad this is not a debate because I feel like as we're going along, I'm like, yeah, I agree with Bianca. So, here's the thing. Everything we do right now is a wager, to a certain extent, right? And it's sort of our best guess that and some guesses are better than others about what will happen. We can expect the terrain to be different. We can hope the terrain will be different under Biden in a sense that one, he will probably, and I say probably because we don't really know. Um, he will probably not come after organized labor in as vicious as a way that the Trump administration has. He probably won't be much of a friend, but he may not try to, basically cut our heads off, to be graphic about it. Um, he will, and this I think is important, is he will not be the spokesperson for white nationalists, far right white nationalist groups. He also won't be a spokesperson for Black liberation either, right? Um, he may do something better for the undocumented folks at the border. But we already know what he's done under the Obama administration for undocumented people in terms of deportation, right? Like, I mean, records, right? I, if I and I don't want to, I don't want to be incorrect about this, but I still think um, if I'm correct that the Obama Biden administration still have deported record still have the record for the amount of undocumented people that have been deported and broken away from their families, if I'm correct, right? So we can't look for a comprehensive really justice centered immigration policy from that administration. So in that regards, who knows, right? And on environmental stuff, we can wager that there will at least be some kind of attempt to get some kind of uh, basic type of environmental legislation done that will be far from adequate, right, for what we're facing. Uh, but we can't be sure about it. But we could, we could make a good guess. So those are just some of the things that I think will be a little bit different, right? So there's at least sort of an orientation to just not being as horrible versus, say, a second Trump administration. I think a second Trump administration I would actually take a step back from Trump himself and ask yourself, well, what does it mean if this country votes for Donald Trump again? What does it mean about the organization of social forces and millions of people right now, and what are they prepared to permit in this country? So I know a lot of people are like, well, we got to get Trump out because he's going to do all of these things. Well, we presidents do what we permit them to do, right? And so if he's reelected, it won't be because not enough people voted. It'll be because a lot of people voted for this guy. Um, you know, and it'll be because there are actual social forces that exist in this country that want to move the country in that way. And so it also makes me want to get back to a bigger point, which is that the rightward movement of this country is not purely on the strength of the right. It's also off of the historical weakness and fragmentation of the left, right? We have not built our own independent working class and socialist forces because we've been depending on more progressive and hopefully liberal Democrats to carry that work for us, right? For fear that if we don't support them, then we end up with a catastrophic option. And now here we are. And I read this passage from there's a Black Marxist named August Nims, and he wrote this passage, and it hit me in my stomach, like it hit me hard, because I was like, damn, he said back in 2004 that the left keeps hopping onto these campaigns with the Democratic Party so much, and as a result, we have not invested the energy and the time to actually organize our own forces, and as a result, one day we're going to have somebody that's going to be so bad that we're going to be hoping for George Bush again. That was in 2004. Well, I bet you there's a lot of people right now that would be like, you know what? I would take George Bush over Donald Trump if George Bush was running as a Democrat. So I say that to say that this gets to the question about like, why does it matter, sort of the contradictory sentiment about whether or not, no matter what, that we're going to have to struggle. I say no matter what, we have to struggle because if you look at the lives of working class people, and I think Bianca touched on this, it doesn't matter who's president in the sense that our lives don't seem to actually get better. Sometimes they get worse, but but they don't get better. And we have to continue to figure out how to keep moving forward. For the left and for the socialist movement, regardless of who is in office, we've got to figure out how to build our forces and to actually organize the working class so that we can actually have an alternative. And right now, what I kind of hear in a lot of the very genuine and valid fear and about this moment is sort of like, we've got to just put aside everything that you're doing right now and get over here and do this. If we do this, then we'll be good, and then we can go back to that. But we've been doing it over and over and over and over again. And trust me, this is the first time in my life that I have not been a registered Democrat. I've always stayed registered as a Democrat. I've always voted for the lesser evil. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. Yeah, I'll vote for the lesser evil this time as well. I'm not a moralist when it comes to elections. But the point is, I also realize that we cannot depend on them to even be the kind of stopgap or brakes or whatever the heck we want to. We can't depend on them to do that. And I feel like that's where we're kind of going still as a left. I hope I covered what you. I know I kind of went off a little bit.
That's all right. There's a lot of stuff there, and we'll come back to it. So Bianca, of course, you can also piggyback on that. But a specific question I had for you is, I agree that we, there was so much about Trump, like fixating on Trump as a personality, which actually seemed to feed him. That is, I mean, sort of pointing out every sort of bad thing and mannerism became part of his appeal. And so exactly the way you said, I was really wary of like fixating on that. So that said, though, are there things about Trump, or let's say the Trump administration, that strike you as like particularly, Trumpian, are there unique things there that we should pay attention to?
The chaos, that's the brand. right?
Yeah, chaos.
The chaos, that's the brand. The getting people worked up, the reactionary kind of like answers, the people, the feeling of like that this whole thing is just out of control, out of all of our control. And I think that leads to like an apathy in a way. And I think that that's exactly what he's trying to do, as well as particularly he pays more attention, I feel like, than any president that I can remember to socialists. It may just be the moment, but I think that he goes out of his way to like push the Democrat, right? Like he went out of his way to push him against us, right? Like to bring it out that he's not for the Green New Deal, to bring it out, you know, that he signed the crime bill, to bring it out to the forefront and say, you can't even say the words law enforcement because your party is so divided about what to do about this issue, right? Y'all want to put on kente cloth, but you don't want to, you know, do anything else. So I just feel like, you know, and that's the part with Trump is that it's always part truth. And that's the dangerous part of it. It's like he lies so much, and then every once in a while there's something that's super true, and that's why the Democrats don't really have much to offer except for, you know, because they're not going to do many things differently. They haven't made us any promises besides not, you know, besides the tax cut thing. I think there's some like means testing around tuition and maybe that really milquetoast environmental bill that's much needed and that we will take. They haven't promised anything. So I think chaos with a sprinkle of the truth is his brand. And I think that's really hard for us to push back against, or has been. But I think that we continue to do it. And I see somebody asked a question about like, what do we do if Biden wins by a landslide and people are demobilized? Well, I think that's like why we're having these conversations now. And I think that's why we've been organizing for the last 4 years to bring up Medicare for all, to talk about what it, like these universal programs, to talk about what it means to challenge white supremacy and rid ourselves of that, of patriarchy, right? We've really been setting the tone for the conversation. And I think that as we raise people's expectations and standards, then we don't have to worry, because then people will hear Biden, they'll give him a chance. It'll be a while. It's not going to be like an instant, we're so enraged. People are going to be mad at us if we say something to Biden, probably within the first 6 months, because they're going to be like, give the guy a shot to make things better, right? But we know that regardless, we're going to be mobilizing and organizing our people. And like to the point that Keon make, which I think is spot on, is like the reason that we're in this losing position is because we haven't built much infrastructure on the left. We haven't proven to people that we can feed them in mass, you know, when they're hungry, that we could protect them from vigilantes who want to murder them on protest lines. We haven't even proved, you know, that we can, you know, protect from mass deportations in all the instances. And so people respond to power, and I feel like we haven't built enough power yet to be credible. And I think we saw that with the Sanders campaign, and we're going to continue to see it now. But I think it's really, really important for us to find our allies in the movement that want to figure out what it looks like to protect democracy, both physically, right, with our bodies, and in other ways as well. And so I encourage people to start thinking about what that looks like. I encourage people to start applying to be poll workers if you haven't already done so. I encourage people to get your groups together and figure out what's your plan on election day, and then where are you going to be after? Are you going to be at the Capitol? Are you going to be at your local elected's office? Where do you feel like is the most strategic for where you live? Because it looks different for all of us, really. But I can say for us, you know, we'll be outside Chuck Schumer's house being like, how dare you? You failed us again, right? And I think those conversations are more important than just like the Trump dialogue that we hear from everywhere else.
I think like Bianca definitely hit it about like, again, it's about how we're going to build our forces. And I'll give you just a very real example or scenario. I keep thinking back, and I'm always frustrated and pissed off about this, to be honest. When COVID first really hit hard, right? And people are terrified at work. When, you have here in Philadelphia, we have a hospital that was just shut down because a millionaire or whatever is decided he wants to turn into luxury condos, and he refused to open it up to provide overflow if we needed it. When you have hundreds of thousands of nurses and doctors and medical staff saying that they need basic PPE in order to not die, and now you find that a bunch of them are dying, right? While they're trying to save people's lives. Like in a situation like that, if you have an organized, coherent left that is prepared to throw down, right? Imagine DSA with all of its members, but in a consolidated, coherent structure with a real strategy, prepared to mobilize and do what needs to be done. Imagine trade unions with militant left-wing trade unions within its ranks, organized, prepared to move those organizations into action. We would be having a very different conversation right now, because I could promise you, under those circumstances, this country would have been shut down, and workers would probably be running those factories producing the PPE. Hundreds of thousands of people will probably still be alive today if we had that kind of left, that kind of power, right? Because we would have intervened in that section, in that particular point in time, right? But the reality is we weren't, and we still aren't quite there yet, right? We're working on it, but we weren't prepared for that. None of us were prepared for a pandemic, but we weren't organized and coherent enough to do what needed to be done in that particular moment. And I strongly feel to this day that many working class people would have followed us into battle in that particular period of time, because they saw a complete failure of our government. We saw businesses talking, businesses and politicians talking about how to balance, saving people's lives and sparing business, in a time, in a time that your government's supposed to be there for you. So just think about, these are the kinds of things we need to be keeping on our mind right now, because guess what? A second wave of the virus is coming. Other crises will confront us, and the left needs to provide the kind of political leadership that is needed in a country that has none, that is for working class people. So I think that we need to always keep that on the forefront of our mind more than any of these other questions, in my opinion.
Well, thank you both. I mean, you both seem to agree on sort of, well, we need to be much stronger and more coherent than we are. And at the same time, currently, we are just not there yet. And so, given that, so one thing that, for example, I'll say that holds me up on this is that, if you believe some of the recent projections of something like, in the next, I think it's November and December, that of the people who are going to die, by the end of this year, about 70,000 of them may have been saved simply if we had a government that, never mind Medicare for all and all of those things, that was simply consistent about, providing testing and simply encouraging people to wear masks. And so at some level, I'm like, well, we aren't strong enough to fight the other fights yet. Can we save those people? And I'm like, maybe it actually, so Keon, you said George Bush. I mean, I'm like, maybe I take anyone who's willing to wear a mask and just do the basic things we need to get through for the next few months. But maybe that's, maybe, I mean, you both have been quite eloquent on sort of that, there are other ways of thinking about this. So what about, we're actually getting some really good questions here. One version of this that I'll pick up on is, one of the things that I think were really disappointed with respect to Biden, other than Medicare for all, was the absence of anything like a Green New Deal. Some, certainly compared to Trump, some fairly significant, statements about investments in green energy. But yeah, do you think the differences there are, okay, so now it's my turn to go on for a bit, but someone like Noam Chomsky, who historically has really insisted on the similarities between the two parties, has been saying now openly for a couple of years that based on this issue alone, the differences between the two parties on the willingness to address the climate change makes the Republican Party the most dangerous organization to humans right now, just because it's blocking that. And so what do you think of that difference? Is that large enough or not, for us to be saying something more positive about the Democrats compared to the Republicans?
I'm characterizing as we just need to stop the bleeding, but we're not going to heal from the disease or whatever it is, we're not going to heal from that, but we have to stop the bleeding first to save ourselves, right? And then once we stabilize ourselves a bit, then we got to fight to heal. And I feel like that's how I'm presenting it to people. That's how I'm thinking about it. I think there is a difference. I think that people know that there's a difference, but the fact is that Joe Biden is a racist. He's a rapist. And, he's very similar to Trump, just less extreme in a lot of ways. And so I think that we don't need to romanticize the Democratic Party. And I also agree with Keon that the terrain is going to be different. The Democratic Party is not nearly as aligned as the Republican Party, right? And so, if Trump gets reelected, it will be a resounding, thing for him to say yes, this is a mandate for my program. I think if Joe Biden gets elected, it's because people hate Trump so much, and now I think there's a lot of question marks in people's head on what they expect from him and what they're going to push him on. But I think that people do understand that there's a difference, and I also want to be really careful because I think that we sometimes fall into this liberal sense of civility is the difference, and that I don't think that we should be worried about civility. I mean, both parties have blood on their hands. This is past civility. But yes, certainly to answer your question, Sanjeev, it is a difference. It is a big enough difference. We have to stop the bleeding. We have to stop it now.
I mean, I agree. It's kind of like, I've got some military folks that I hang around with, and they talk about it's basically you're stopping the bleeding, but while you're still in motion in combat. You know what I mean? So that's what we've got to do. And I think that begs the question is how do we do this in a way that continues to help us build while we're also stopping the bleeding, so to speak. So, I mean, make no mistakes, I have no qualm saying, like I said, I've already voted. I sent my ballot in. They told me they got it last week. I'm good. I mean, it's not a question to me of whether folks should vote and whether they should vote for Joe Biden or whatever. Some people say vote your conscience. I mean, I'm not sure what that means. My conscience told me I had to vote, so I voted for Joe. You know what I mean, so to speak, or against Trump. I don't really care against Trump. But I think that the bigger question again is still this question about how are we preparing ourselves in this moment, right? What is it that we could be doing right now to do both is the question. So for example, I agree with Bianca. I think poll watching is really important. I think making sure people know where their polling place is really important. If you have to take people there, go ahead, take people there. I think that's a good thing too. I think this is also a good time to be talking about the socialist vision in our politics and what it is that we see going on in society. Sometimes I get the sense in these conversations that it's let's stop talking about socialism and let's just talk about the most immediate thing, which is this election, which is you have to vote for Biden. You have to vote for Biden because Trump is really bad. Trump is really bad. I think this is the perfect time to be talking about, well, we're socialist and we think Trump is horrible. He's got to go. At the same time, here's what we're trying to do, and we know Joe Biden is not going to do this, right? I think people, everyday working class people, can actually hold both of those ideas. That right, this guy is actually horrible, and that we actually want this thing. This guy is not going to give it to us, but this guy is actually catastrophic. People can tell the difference between this guy is bad for us and this guy is catastrophic, and they know what to do with that. And I think sometimes in the left and as socialists, we sometimes get this kind of idea that, those people over there can't decipher between those things. And therefore we have to go all in and making sure that they're clear who to vote for kind of thing or what to do. I don't think that's the case. So. Oh, are we answering some of these questions on the side or?
Yeah, let's. So, the first question I see here as they were coming in. So there were questions about where people should mobilize. So you guys have touched on that, and I know that, or I think Megan is also going to sort of have some references to that. Um, the next set of questions. So okay, so if it is about stopping the bleeding but being honest, and I really like how, so Bianca, you put it like, yeah, stop the bleeding first, and then Kion is like, you know, people are capable of, like, we know both things at the same time. Um, so I mean, does that mean, like, so there's a question, why shouldn't we support the Democrats openly? Why shouldn't we take an explicit position? And be clear that we are not saying that do this because your lives are going to be better on the day after the election. We're in fact saying this knowing that they're not, that the struggle has to continue, but we are saying do this because we have to stop the bleeding. Yeah, so make of that as you will. Why shouldn't we take a more explicit position than we are, which currently we are saying, yeah, we don't like either of these guys?
I mean, I said, my framing is that we should be voting against Trump, and we should be explicit that people should vote against Trump. Like, we should say those words. We are voting against Trump. People should vote against Trump. We need to get Trump out. We should be explicit about that. I just don't see, as an organization that grew particularly out of a reaction to Trump being elected, a way for us to then now, say Joe Biden's name and act like we're vouching for him. That's what I'm thinking about it. Like, do you vouch for Joe Biden? No, I don't vouch for Joe Biden. We don't endorse him, but I don't think that it's necessary to say his name. People know who's running for president, y'all. Like, people are in line voting right now. Like, there's no, like, who are the candidates? Like, everybody knows the candidates. And so I just don't see what we get out of that. And I'll just add something else too, that's kind of unrelated, but I saw this question. Like, I wonder how many people have rapid response networks in their chapter. Because I know, for one, we were really good at being out in the streets in 2016 and 17 to really express our anger against Trump. And I think a lot of people, went back inside and decided that that wasn't worth it, that there were other ways to organize, which is true. But I do think it is important to have organized cadre in the streets. I think it is important because that's how people are showing up right now. And I'll just say that, like, I haven't seen us really, like, DSA as an organization. I'd be really curious to know how we can mobilize very quickly around these things. And so I think first and foremost, that's what people need to be doing, is trying to figure out who's going to show up and where, and what are people willing to show up for. And I think that part of the challenge that we have is, like, what are we fighting for? I think besides just, like, democracy, right? But that's almost the only thing that, well, we can say what we're fighting for, but that's the only thing that you can say if you say explicitly Biden, because what do you want people to vote for Biden for? What is he fighting for? What is he going to do? We don't know, but we know we're fighting for democracy, and we know what our issues are. And so we just always have to stick to those. I think it's confusing. And I watched so many of my family members be so enthusiastic about Bernie in 2016. And the minute he cozied up to Hillary Clinton, they went straight to Trump. And I'm not talking about, like, I've seen several people do that. And I can't imagine how many more millions of people are like that. I don't think we have anything to gain by saying Joe Biden's name.
Keon, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things I just want to that I think is important to say, which is, one is that sometimes there's a separation between the work that we've been doing as socialists all this time from, say, doing work to get Trump out. Like, I know people say, well, why won't you fight against Trump? And the answer I have to that is, we've been fighting against Trump, right? I mean, when we are out in the street protesting Trump in the very beginning, we were fighting against Trump. When we fought against the Muslim ban, we were fighting against Trump. When we fought for Medicare for all, we fought against Trump. We also fought against Joe Biden, apparently. When we fight for the Green New Deal, we fought against Trump. We fight for labor rights, we were fighting against Trump. So the work that we're doing as socialists and organizing working class people have actually created the possibility for Joe Biden to actually even beat Trump at this very point, right? Not only have we been fighting Donald Trump, we've been fighting his whole entire class. And I think that we just need to be clear that the work that we do as organizers, as activists on the streets and on the doors and all that kind of stuff, that work counts as well towards towards defending ourselves against what Trump is doing, what Trump wants to do, and what Trump represents and all of his forces represent. So we don't want to discount that information. I think what people want to hear is a more conventional, common sense understanding of fighting a candidate or going up against a candidate. That is where you say, I think Joe Biden is good for us and we need to get behind him and support him, right? Like we need to get on the phones and phone bank for Joe Biden. We need to get on the doors and tell people that Joe Biden has something good for you in his bag of goodies. And I just think that that is not the role of socialist organizations. I think there are other things that we can do. And I've already listed some of those things. But I think that our focus is best on figuring out how to, provide a socialist analysis of the political situation. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, we think that Trump is catastrophic and this guy is bad, and catastrophic, of course, is worse. So, we think you should get out and vote. I don't see that as an endorsement. I think people get caught up a little bit on this concept of endorsement. Whereas endorsement is just simply saying in any way that you think this person ought to be in a position. I think endorsement is something else, right? But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with being honest with people about the situation that we're in, and also counting the work that we've done already to this point.
Can I just add too that I think our strength and where we find our power and where people resonate with us is because we are telling the truth. We have the moral ground and we're telling the truth, right? We're telling the truth about the situation when both parties, the media and everybody else is lying. And so for us, it's important for us to be consistent, right? We need to be consistent. We're democratic socialists. We believe in taking down capitalism. We believe in radical democracy in all areas of life. And so I just feel like that consistency and like the reputation that we're building for ourselves is really important. And all it takes is for a couple people to see something flash up on an Instagram story about Joe Biden for them to not understand the difference between an endorsement and the fact that they saw Joe Biden's name next to the Democratic Socialists of America. And that's just not, I think, and I've said it again, worth it to me.
Yeah, so some of this is really sort of both what's correct and a question of strategy is, what we get out of saying or not saying certain things. The agenda. I really liked how you guys both actually talked about we've in fact been fighting against Trump from the day he was elected. Of course, as you both know, fighting against Trump or the Trump agenda or Trumpism, there's a contest for a particular office as well as the agenda, and those two things are the same, but they're also there's a fight for a position, an elected position at the same time. Yes. So when is Bianca running for office? I was wondering the same thing about Keon. The first time I talked to him. So we seem to be moving actually, I think, kind of naturally into this set of issues about. So we are where we are, and for people who want a little bit of the backstory on, so there are all sorts of reasons to not, endorse Biden that Bianca and Keon have laid out. There's also, in the organization, there's organizational reasons we haven't endorsed Biden, and we can fill people on that history if they need that. But moving towards basically the next couple of weeks and then the aftermath, we are getting questions on both sides. One is, what if Biden wins by a landslide? And we've already started talking about that. How do we keep up the energy and prevent people from thinking, well, now it's, back to things are fine, now it's business as usual. But we're also getting the other end of it is, well, what if Trump refuses to leave? So let's say he loses, but there's a contested election and so on. And of course, there is the third possibility that Keon already brought up, that what if Trump wins? I mean, and that's still on the table. I mean, it is an election. We'll know only afterwards. But let's take that middle one. What if there is a contested election? What's our role?
When you say contested, as you mean in a situation where, electoral college and the votes say that Joe Biden has won, and Trump says he refuses to leave, right? Uh,
um, or even a softer version of that. There's a period of uncertainty where it begins to be clear that Biden is winning, but there's enough, there's already litigation apparently. I mean, the number of lawyers involved now has exceeded, the Bush and Gore and so on already. I mean, this is even before anything's happened. Um, and between all the different ways of voter suppression that we are seeing, so simply a dragging out and sort of spilling over maybe into sort of mass protests or sort of doubts about the basic legitimacy of the outcome. What should we be thinking about in that context?
yeah. I mean, I think a few things. I mean, I think it kind of matters whether it's an issue of things have been drug out, or whether it's the guy is simply saying he's not going to leave the White House, right, if he loses. But in the first situation, I think, well, in either case, we need to be in the streets. I mean, I think that's a basic, uh, that's almost a given. We need to be in the streets, and we need to be applying pressure in the streets, right? Um, I think that's really, really important. I think that but in a situation where you've got Trump, and I know this has gotten people really riled up lately, saying he's not going to leave if he loses because he doesn't think it's legitimate. I think in that situation, we've got to move all our forces to not only just be in the streets, but actually just disrupt the function of society as a whole, right? Um, and I think that's the question: is like, are we willing and prepared to do that, right? So there's that part. I think unions are going to have to play a role. I've seen that there was one labor council, I think up, where was it, upstate New York, maybe, I forget, that has already submitted a resolution asking the AFL-CIO to, basically issue a general strike in a situation like that. I know that me, for one, assuming I'm reelected at the time, I actually have elections on the 6th of November. So if reelected, and that is the situation at that time, I'd probably submit a resolution in my local to our general chairman, and also ask for the same thing to happen on the railroad, right? Like, that's what we would do, is uh, uh, we've got, I mean, the working class has to defend its own self, and this is the thing that's really, really difficult for us to sometimes I guess get a handle on, which is that we have all got to do our part to fight back, right? So if Trump doesn't want to leave office, and we've got to make him leave, and if we stand by and we let him stay, then he gets to stay, right? And I think it's really that simple, even though it's complicated, right? Um, so I think that's what has to happen. We really need to be talking to our folks about what we're willing to do to defend the basic constitutional, whatever shred of democracy that we have left, right? I mean, it's a very real situation. Um, and that's also assuming that the military doesn't intervene in such a process, right? And on whose side does the military intervene? But that's another question.
Yeah, I agree with everything Keon just said. I'll just say again, we need rapid response networks. In my mind, I heard somewhere, I don't remember where, that the longest we've ever waited in this country for election results has been March after the election. And so I do think that we all saw the debacle and how like the primaries were handled. I don't think we still don't have a result from I don't think that we should be under any any we shouldn't have any idea in our head that somehow it's going to be cleaner, somehow it's going to be like more clear, somehow this board of elections has like gotten their act together to like figure out how to do this. Like, I think it's going to be messy, but I think that we will have some time. I think that people should be in the streets. I think that people are already in the streets, but I think that we will have some time to kind of, I think that I don't think that we will know the election results until perhaps 2021 of January. I think that's a realistic thing that we should be prepared for. If Trump steals the election, I don't really know. I agree with Keon. I mean, like, who was the military intervening for? I don't know, y'all. NYPD was the first one, like, to endorse Trump, like, you know, and they feel emboldened in their position and like beating the crap out of people on the street and arresting people and targeting people and all these kinds of things, surveilling people because of who's in office. And my sense is that they're probably going to try to defend that too. And so, I mean, to the point that his people are just like these vigilantes carrying guns and that have all of this, like, you know, they're all in agreement. Like, I don't know very many socialist gun clubs. Like, I don't think many of us even, you know, want a violent revolution or believe in like this notion. But are we going to stay in the house? I mean, I can tell you this summer, I know many of my comrades that were beat up by white supremacists and alt-right, and we didn't have a force of a gang of us outside to defend them the next day. We didn't show up in numbers to be like, oh, we're gonna stand against these white supremacists that beat the crap out of our Muslim comrades. We didn't do that. So I don't know what's going to change, but I know, like, I'm just an organizer. Step one, y'all figure out how to get people to mobilize quickly and where you want to mobilize, whether it's the Board of Elections, whether you know, it's your like local Democratic clubs, occupy that, disrupt that. You know, whether it's local elected's office or whether it's state senator's office. I just think that you need to pick and figure out when are we going to say when? Yes, we're going to be in the streets, but when is like the real go time? And I also, to Keon's point, think the working class does have to have a role in this, particularly labor unions. But I in no way want to romanticize like their ability to like move in any kind of like direction that's like cohesive or even fast at that. I mean, I know that there are labor tables forming around this, but I just really have not that. I mean, it's still I still remain to be like convinced whether or not they're real about this, because I know that they're beholden to the Democratic Party, many of them as well. And so at the end of the day, they have something to lose, right? By sticking their necks out, even though they have more to lose if Trump wins. So, you know, let's see what's an emergency. And I think this is like, to Keon's point, like, what are we willing to accept, you know? I think that's what we're about to see. But I think regardless, our message stays the same, our work stays the same. And I think if anything, we just ramp it up and figure out how to get more people doing more things, and less people on social media talking about the things.
I just want to add that I think that like both this question and also some of the things that Bianca laid out in terms about building rapid response teams and being prepared to actually move in such a circumstance, like that's the work that I think we should be focused on doing right now, is getting that shit together, because we ain't together on that and we need to get there. So we're going to have to make a choice about how we're going to divide up our labor and where we're going to put that energy. And to me, this is where socialists should be putting that energy, is building up the actual capacity to fight back and defend ourselves, because we cannot rely on those other folks, those other forces to do it for us. They don't have the same things at stake. Like if Joe Biden doesn't get to be president, you know, I mean, come on. I mean, he's a millionaire. He's good, right? It's not the same situation, right? So let's keep that in mind.
I'll express some disagreement there before moving on to a nice set of questions that I think fit together on the issue of, I mean, Biden personally, you know, will be fine. One of the things that's actually struck me here is how many of the big players in sort of business and, you know, generally what we'd call the establishment, have sort of openly broken with Trump in ways that are that are sort of risky for them. And I don't want to go into this much here, but the Fed Reserve chairman who Trump appointed actually publicly said that uh, the government needs to do more stimulus. Um, this is like a 50-year reversal of what Fed chairs are willing to say. And to me, it was a symptom actually of the cracks that are in the ruling class on this. I think some of them really hate Trump. It's an existential threat to them that he continues. But again, that's sort of a long aside. On the U.S. military, I'll say it was kind of interesting to see during the anti-police protests, the military made it very clear that they would actually disobey a direct order from Trump. And they basically asked him not to give them that order, to not put them in the position of disobeying him. Now, there is the issue of they might have been scared of putting, black soldiers on the streets against the police. I mean, and that's always a concern in the military. I mean, and that may or may not apply here. But I actually think the military is quite committed to sort of they wrote a letter, the Joint Chiefs of Staff wrote a letter reminding soldiers that their first duty is to the Constitution, not the president. And even the Secretary of Defense, who's a Trump appointee, went out of his way to sort of say the same thing. So I think this is all kind of revealing that Trump actually sort of his base is kind of at the top is sort of hollowing out. And in some ways, arguably, that makes him even more dangerous. The one of the questions to you guys, which I can sort of fit together here, is supposing there is a Biden landslide and there's no question, it's sort of what do we do then with we have this mass like socialist organization, we have this huge energy coming off the Sanders campaign. So someone is asking, what's our agenda? When do we build a workers' party, like a real workers' party? How does that work differ from what we've been doing to date? So that's sort of on the opposite end. If Biden wins, what's our 5-year plan or 4-year plan?
I mean, I say first we're gonna nail his ass to the wall. I think that's gonna be like I'm actually hype about the idea. Uh, I'm hype about the idea of it because I think that a lot of people, if there was a Trump victory, folks would just feel. I think the morale would just kind of slow people down. I actually think the work would still be the same in both cases, but there'll be some other stuff we'd have to do if there's a Trump victory. But on top of that work, but I think, and we talked about this. We've been talking about this uh, in the essay about like what should we be focused on maybe the first 100 or so days. And I personally think, and I think there's others out there that think this for sure, uh, we should be focused on the Green New Deal, even though Biden said no. Like we don't adjust, we don't adjust our agenda to what Biden says he's going to do or whatever. The goal is to tell him what to do and make him do it. So uh, there's specific aspects of the Green New Deal, and I know the Green New Deal campaign committee actually came with what I think is a pretty brilliant, idea that came out of the Green New Deal summit and all that stuff that they've done. Uh, that looks at focusing on things like a federal jobs guarantee. We're going to need that. Making sure we actually have some type of program for a people bailout for a change, right? Because Wall Street got trillions of dollars right off the bat, during this whole Corona thing. And I mean, they've gotten richer. They're doing great as always. So we need something to get our people, to bail our people out, as well as, like I said, federal jobs guarantee. We need to also be thinking about austerity budgets. So these are different components of the Green New Deal that we can focus on right now. I think Medicare for all and other healthcare related things like the emergency, I should know the name of it, but it's like the Emergency Healthcare Act that help folks with providing healthcare with people right now. We need to have that because folks are going to really need it. And I think there's ways we can push for real funding for building the type of health facilities, rebuilding schools, and providing the funding that we needed in our schools, our public education institutions in particular. So uh, I think those are some things. I know that there's the Breathe Act, and there's elements of the Breathe Act in particular that I think are really key to be pushing. Uh, but yeah, I think we could have ourselves some fun, with Biden at that point.
If Joe Biden wins, the first and foremost, we need to be advocating for a more progressive stimulus package. I feel like we need to push for that for the American people. We need that. We're going into winter. And those same service workers who have been outside on the sidewalk serving people will now be outside in the cold and potentially be just laid off and sent home because people won't be doing, going out as they were somewhat in the summer. I also think that we need to pass the what is it, the CARES Act or the HEROES Act, whatever the one is that gives people universal hazard pay for essential workers and gives people universal sick time. That's something that we should they want to keep talking about the mishandling of COVID, then make it right. And that's something we should come out the gate with. I also think that, we should be obviously advocating for mass testing. I'm not going to say a vaccine because that whole thing seems like a mess. So I'm just going to say, let's just start with some mass testing, and we should have a number. We should be making a demand, right? And then I also think that we should be pushing him to fully staff the National Labor Relations Board, and to repeal some of the really horrible things that Trump has passed. So like things like, a 3-week election turnaround, for instance. I think that we need, those things back. Those are the things that I agree, the Green New Deal. And you know what, just to be funny, I really want to bring up reparations again, because since Joe Biden, you ain't Black unless you vote for Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is a candidate for all the Black folks. Run me my reparations check, or at least pass the Clyburn bill so that we could start to talk about it. And I think that putting him on the spot or trying to figure out, put him in a weird position about that is a good idea, since he's so blackety black.
And I think that's really key, because we were talking about this question about people becoming demobilized. And like Bianca said earlier, like that's our job as socialists also, is to keep people mobilized. And one way we do that is simply by actually, holding him to account to the things that he claims that he wanted to do, right? At least in a broad idea. And look, working class Black folks are going to be key to any kind of forward. In general, that's historically been the case. But like in this particular moment, working class Black folks are going to be key to holding Joe Biden accountable and actually getting more out of Joe Biden than what he's willing to give, right? Because he's made a lot of freaking, I don't know if there are kids on this. So he's made a lot of freaking promises, to Black folks in particular about, what he was going to do, this and that and the third. And I think that that's going to keep the energy high. And I think we can make some real interventions in that way if we target all of this stuff in a very clear way. So.
Well, hey, thank you both for, that is such a, for me, just, so it just, I'm now probably going to have a hard time going to bed. Here it's like 10:30, which is like way past my bedtime, but this is going to keep, you gave me lots to think about. We got a lot of questions about specific thing. What can I do now? And so in a couple of minutes, I'll be turning it over to Megan Swoboda from who's going to talk about the November strategy document. And that is, as both Kian and Bianca have kept reminding us, ultimately the important question is, what should we be doing, now and over the next few weeks and months? So all I have to add to that is a personal observation that we need to be having these conversations both nationally and in our chapters often. We need to give ourselves the time to solve specific political problems creatively. And for this particular situation in this particular election, my own feeling is that we've been we've been frozen a little bit in knowing how to do that. And of course now it's like 2 weeks left. So could we figure out how to unite as DSA around a slogan like "Dump Trump"? and at the same time making it clear that we oppose, neoliberal malarkey. Now, maybe we could figure out how to do both of those things, maybe not. But as the largest socialist organization in the world's wealthiest country, it is our responsibility to at least try, and maybe to even try doing it a few months ahead of time. So with that, we'll move to the next part of this event. So thank you again to Kiana and Bianca. I'd also like to thank my comrades on the National Political Education Committee for their help, especially Marianella and Riley, and the DSA staffers, Michael, Chris, and Priscilla, who've been making everything work smoothly in the background, so we haven't had to pay attention to it. Please continue to watch our announcements for the next events we are going to do, I think in November and December, on what I'm sure you've all heard about, these sort of competing perspectives on the relationship between race and class in the US, as well as the history of people of color in DSA. So thank you all for joining us. Megan, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bianca, Kian, Sanjeev. That was it. My camera's off, but I'm sitting over here nodding, just so excited about everything that you all were saying. And I think one of the things that was really striking to me is how much it fits with the things that we have been talking about with the November strategy. So I'll just say hi, everyone. My name is Megan Swabata. I'm a member of the National Political Committee. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm also a part of the Growth and Development Committee of DSA. And what we really wanted to take just a few minutes as we're closing out this call to talk to you all about is what we on the NPC have been putting together, right? We have been discussing for a while, what is our strategy for November? And we have a little quick slideshow that I hope we can put up here, that we just want to use to kind of walk through some of the things that we have been talking to people about. So Bianca and Kian hit on so many of this, right? We need rapid response. We have to be planning right now, right? We want to be thinking about how we're going to defend democracy on November 3rd and towards Inauguration Day. And we want to be thinking about how we're fighting and growing a socialist movement, right? Which is why we're both orienting around what we can do on November 3rd and following, as well as running the 100K drive right now, right? We're recruiting people to DSA because we know that it's going to take numbers. We need mass action, and we are going to need socialists who are committed and ready to either push Biden, right, and demand all of these things that I think Bianca and Kian laid out so wonderfully, or we're going to have to be in the streets. We're going to have to be analyzing where are those nodes of power? How are we shutting stuff down to demand a safe and fair election? So what we did as the NPC is we laid out a few different scenarios because we wanted to think through strategically what are the different outcomes of this election. And we wanted to share these with DSA so that you and your chapters can be thinking through these different scenarios as well, right? Scenario number 1, Biden victory, Trump concession. Scenario number 2, a Trump victory. Scenario number 3, Biden victory, but Trump does not leave. Scenario number 4, no election, right? This is 2020, Lord only knows, so we put that one in there. But those are the 4 scenarios that we have been discussing and that we wanted to present to the membership so that folks in their chapters, in their groups, wherever you are, can think through, okay, what is my plan if any of these scenarios happen? And so we've been asking people to do this scenario planning work. So if we can just go to the next slide. And basically what scenario planning is creating action plans for each of those scenarios. And the one that we're really putting emphasis on, because it's the one that's the most work, and I think it helps sort of like plan out different ones, is that scenario number 3, Biden wins, but Trump doesn't leave. What does your chapter do? What do we as National DSA do? What do you and your organizing committee do? What do you as an at-large member do, right? All of this applies to all of us because we are DSA and we are going to want to move together in that moment, right? We need to think about what is our rapid response? Who is our target? what is our messaging? Those are the three main questions, right? So what we're asking members to do, chapters, organizing committees at large, whoever you are, is to create an action plan. So if we want to go to the next slide. And creating an action plan, I think, really is about, analyzing where you are, where the nodes of power are around you, and who's going to go out and take over that node of power with you, right? Is it your chapter? Is it your chapter plus that union? Is it your chapter plus that community group? Is it your chapter plus that, religious group? Like, whatever it is, like, think about who's going to go out with you and where you guys are going and what you're asking for. So I think that, this obviously looks different for so many different places, which is why I'm trying to be vague and just like hit those like main points. But we're, as you're going through, as you're thinking about those three things, you're going to want to consider what is your capacity. You're going to want to make sure that you can be clear about the different steps of the plan. You're going to want to, you can go to the next slide. Awesome. You're going to want to think about where power is and what the risks are. Okay. But the thing that I also want to say, and you can go to the final slide here, is that we don't want you to do this alone. This is not something that just show up at your chapter and be like, all right, now we got to do this. Your field organizer wants to help you do this. They want to help you do it, and we want to know what you're doing so that we can plug new members who are coming in to the work that you're planning to do. So the most important ask that we have for the November strategy right now is that chapters, organizing committees, folks in DSA, talk to your field organizer and create an action plan, and that you share that action plan with your field organizer by October 27th. So that's the big ask, right? Talk to your chapter, make an action plan, talk to your field organizer, and share that action plan with your field organizer. So I have actually a question for folks who are still on this call, and there are 237 of you, which is incredible. We have a poll here that I think we're going to share in just 1 minute. Michael might be able to do that. Yes. So we want to know, have you and your chapter started making your November strategy action plan? Yes, no, we want help. No, we're not going to do anything. Please let us know. And what we'll do is we'll actually be able to use this information to follow up with you. So if you want help, click that no, give us help, and we will make sure your field organizer gets that info. So please take a little bit of time to fill out this poll. I see numbers coming in, but I'm going to give people all of the time that they need because this has been a long call. And you might have been listening and doing other things and are now just coming back to your computer to fill this out. All right, it looks like numbers are starting to sort of taper off here. Okay, I think we can end it now. Thank you all so much. And thank you all so much for being on this call. Thank you for taking this question so seriously. This is a critical moment for us, right? This is a critical moment for the socialist movement. Something's going to happen and we need to be ready for it. And not just ready for it because it's one moment, but because it's going to become the base of what comes next, right? We are preparing ourselves for the next fight by getting ready for this one. We're going to keep growing, we're going to keep learning, and we're going to keep figuring out how to do this better and better. We are better than we were 4 years ago. This is something I keep remembering. We are at least, there were 6,000 members 4 years ago, and here we are coming up to 76,000. This is a big thing that we are doing together. So thank you all so much for being on this call. Thank you for being a part of DSA. And thank you for taking very seriously your work of building a socialist movement. I will pass it over to Sanjeev just to finally close us out. Thank you all, solidarity. Oh, Sanjeev, I see that you're speaking, but I cannot hear you.
How about now? All right. So yes, thank you, everyone. 2/3 of respondents said they would like some help. And Michael, I forgot to ask you to push the poll on swing states. We still have a couple of hundred folks. If you are able to do that, maybe we can find out who's here from swing states. So yeah, there you go. So yeah, please, just to reiterate, please use your chapter, use your proximate, your nearby comrades. And if you need help for a plan, it looks like we have a way to get that started for everyone. From the point of view of the Political Education Committee, I would say, please keep sort of helping us all collectively figure out there's principles, there's values, then there's political situations and realities and things we have to adapt to, things we have to fight against. What's the right balance? All of that. So it was wonderful to have you all with us. And again, thanks to all the organizers and the staff people who made this possible. We got so many questions that I wish we had gotten to. Hey, so another panel, but yeah, thank you all. Do some of us want to stay behind for a couple of minutes to just sort of debrief after we officially end, or what's the? I guess we should have figured this out before.
I think for now we should say thank you to everyone who is still listening and say that I think this is the end of our call, and we are so happy that you all got on here, and maybe all together say a good goodbye in solidarity.
All right. Thanks you all. Thanks Bianca, Kian, Megan. See you guys soon.
Bye everyone.